Hello, 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 and welcome back, family, to Masquerade Monday. My name is Huddy, and tonight we're talking LA by Night. As always, this video is not scripted and these opinions are all my own, so take what I say with a grain of salt. It has been a long time since the family has gotten to see the Valley Coterie for reasons that we are all aware of. This reunion is even more bittersweet, at least for me, because this season has been announced to be the final season. As Jason Carl wrote in a blog post before the airing of episode 1, all good things must come to an end. But luckily for us, we have this whole amazing season in front of us and more stories to come sometime in the future. Also, for full disclosure, and in case you missed the news because I decided not to make a video discussing it, I now work as a community ambassador for World of Darkness, and have had more than a peek behind the curtain. But these recaps will be no different than they always were, because I am still a massive LA by Night fangirl, and nothing is going to change that. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive in. Our scene begins at an indeterminate time between the end of Season 4 and Season 5 in downtown LA at the Farmers and Merchants Bank. Katya and Ebe are in discussion, with Katya sharing her concerns about members of her clan going missing, specifically Vera, who was mentioned along with Bosch last season. Katya believes the Anarchs might be involved, but they are interrupted by the arrival of the Seneschal, Susanna Rochelle. Paying no mind to their conversation, she declares that both Ebe and Katya must let her into their minds through her telepathy, and in exchange she will give them their heart's desire. Ebe offers no resistance to this request, and with the thoughts of the threat the Thin Bloods pose foremost in her mind, while Victor Temple lurks in the shadows of her thoughts, mixed and dim. Katya, on the other hand, resists the Seneschal's advances, but she's overpowered by the Toreador. Foremost in Katya's mind is, of course, Eva. A memory flashes in Katya's mind of Eva as a mortal emerging from a lake in New York, with Katya exclaiming, "Let me have just this one thing. She loves me." The Seneschal, unsurprisingly, is unmoved by the sentiment. At this moment, Prince Vannevar Thomas arrives, Book of Nod in hand. Vannevar seems to look better, less addled than when he was under the dementation of Therese Vorman. Whether he is permanently cured or healed remains unknown. Coming to no one's surprise, considering Vannevar's actions last season, he immediately asks about the status of the Thin Bloods in the city. Ebe and Katya inform him that they are both numerous and mysterious in their actions and abilities. The prince then informs him that Baron Victor Temple is on his way, that he is going to demand that Victor tell him where the Thin Bloods are or he will be destroyed. Katya congratulates the prince on how healthy he looks and implies that he has been personally assisting him get over Therese's interference with his mental state with the aid of Strauss, which should come as no surprise as we saw her perform such a feat, albeit temporarily, for the prince in Season 4. It is at this moment Katya mentions that Eva, or Evangeline, is with her and that she has returned to the Camarilla. Vannevar wishes to speak with her, and as she is summoned, Eva, draped in a gorgeous crimson dress and bearing ruby red eyes, wastes no time bowing her head and kissing the ring of the Prince of Los Angeles. Now, this scene was shown in the teaser for episode 1, which I helped make, so you're welcome and I'm sorry about that. Eva is immediately accosted by Suzanne's mental abilities being thoroughly exercised tonight, and although Eva does not resist her prodding, she does attempt to thwart Suzanne by purposefully thinking specific things. First, Suzanne forces a visage of Jasper to Eva's thoughts, and although Eva admits to affection, she purposely thinks of Jasper's final death. Katya's image is next, and Eva thinks of her sire seated somewhere comfortable but alone. Prince Vannevar Thomas is then brought into her mind's eye, and a conflict of emotions plays out in her thoughts. On one side, to do as Strauss commands, be obedient and dutiful, follow the prince in his mission against the Thin Bloods and the Anarchs, but there is a darkness in her that wants to rebel against him. With Strauss foremost in her thoughts, a memory comes forth unbidden of Strauss handing Eva a goblet filled with vitae, welcoming her back to the clan and faction where she belongs. And as Eva drinks from the chalice, her emotions become more aligned with the goals and demands of Maximilian Strauss. Now this I find very interesting. Back in the day, and by that I mean before the Tremere Chantry in Vienna went kablooey, Tremere neonates were made to commit to the Tremere Code after their embrace, which means the neonate had to drink the blood of the inner council of the 7 original Tremere through a ritual called the Transubstantiation of 7, which, after drinking from a chalice imbibed with this ancient blood, brought them one step towards a blood bond to the clan's leaders and ensured some degree of loyalty to their peers. But as of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, Tremere cannot make blood bonds bonds with other kindred through normal means, and by that I mean another vampire drinking from a tremere will not result in the blood bond. However, Strauss is very old, and from the 14th century at least according to what he says in season 2, and likely has found magical ways around such a thing. If Eva is trying to play both sides of this conflict or attempting to deceive the Ivory Tower for purposes of revenge, she is playing a dangerous game, to put it mildly. Finally, Victor Temple is brought to Eva's mind. Her feelings are that of anger, calling back to season 3 when Victor used his dominate powers on her to force her behavior. Suzanne is satisfied, as is Katya, and Eva appears to have passed her test. It is at this moment Victor Temple arrives with an entourage of security and SUVs. They remain outside the building, and he is concealing one of his Raufous pistols beneath his suit. Victor seems surprised to see all the kindred gathered, especially Eva. Vannevar wastes no time in educating Victor on the purposes of the meeting and demands to know what he knows about the Thin Bloods. Victor attempts to negotiate, charm the powerful vampires gathered, but Vannevar is having none of it, and immediately instructs Eve to restrain him, which she does masterfully with her shadow tendrils. Even restrained, Victor refuses to give up any information about the Thin Bloods without something in return from the prince, which Victor suggests be an addendum to the already made truce, meaning the Anarch districts of LA remain unbound, Camarilla districts remain Ivory Tower with no overarching ruler, much the way LA was some 20 years ago during the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines game when Prince Sebastian LaCroix held the princedom of Los Angeles. Suzanne once again reaches in with her mind and penetrates Victor's, which he attempts to resist, but Suzanne is old and powerful and, more importantly, successful. The Seneschal brings up the idea of the Thin Bloods, and we learn that not only does Victor think they are indeed a threat, but at the same time he has empathy for their plight. While Victor and Suzanne do this mental dance, Katya and Eva excuse themselves for the evening, which is granted by the prince, but on their way out, Aurora, the La Sombre Scourge, wishes them farewell, with a devious look towards Eva, to which Eva responds with a crackling of lightning between her fingers. We know that Eva brought Rodrigo into torpor in season 3 with Jasper sending him to the final death shortly afterwards, and it appears that Aurora knows this now too, or at the very least has a strong inkling of the fact. After Aurora leaves as well, the remaining kindred attempt to go back to their threats and warnings about the Thin Bloods, but several things happen at once, and yes, if it isn't obvious, I helped make that teaser as well. A small drone-like object is seen at one of the windows of the building, and at Victor's warning, Eve releases him, albeit roughly, from the arms of Araman. Chaos ensues instantly. Victor's security detail get into a firefight with these intruders, and Campbell is seen to be bleeding out on the floor. Victor immediately soaring leaps out of the building. Suzanne attempts to determine who these people are, and of course it is more than likely they are Second Inquisition, while Vannevar activates his majesty to cause these mortals to be awestruck by his very presence. But things very rarely go according to plan, and some of these mortals are not affected by this power, which is something that some hunters have as a great boon in their fight against the blank bodies. As Sheriff Ebe attempts to get her prince and her seneschal out of the building, a great explosion causes Vannevar, Suzanne, and Ebe to become injured and burned, and Ebe fails her frenzy check, fleeing in the face of fire, leaving her charges behind. Victor fares little better, taking significant amount of gunshot and fall damage, as he too flees the scene and crashes down through a manhole cover to escape that little tactical drone that alerted them to all this to begin with. Vannevar and Suzanne, now alone, Vannevar begins reciting from the Book of Nod as he begins marching towards the hunters. The vignette plays and we are treated to a scene that occurred earlier in the evening between Agent Handler and a new player in Los Angeles, at least new to us viewers, played by the incredible Brennan Lee Mulligan. This new, clearly faith-based hunter is extremely knowledgeable about vampires, even using terms like canite, and declares that tonight Los Angeles will burn in holy war against these monsters of the ancient world. If you haven't already, please go follow the World of Darkness Twitch channel, subscribe to them on YouTube, and if you can, sub to their channel on Twitch. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to me as well, and let me know your thoughts on Episode 1, Tower of Glass in the comments. As always, I'll see you in the next one.